Hey friends, in this video, I'm going to break down the cease and desist letter I received from Dr. Joan Ifland, point by point, and respond to each allegation. Joan gives her side in live video chats in the Addiction Reset community. Some are recorded, some are not. Since I have been removed from the community, the only way I can give my side of the story is by creating these videos that I will share publicly. I also want to be clear, I'm not going to disclose all of my evidence that I have that disputes her claims. If Joan decides she wants to take this to court, I'm not going to give her the advantage of previewing my full defense. What I will do here is share enough so that you can see the flaws, contradictions, and overreach in these accusations. Everything I say in this video is based on my own experiences, publicly available information, and my good faith opinions. And for the record, a cease and desist letter is not a court order. It's simply one party's version of events, and I am entitled to my own. Okay, so here is the cease and desist from Joan. Dear Ms. Lammert, this letter serves as a formal demand that you immediately cease and desist from engaging in the activities described herein, which constitute unlawful and unauthorized conduct in connection with the business operations and intellectual property of Food Addiction Reset, LLC, or FAR. It has come to our attention that you have engaged in the following actions, all of which are considered violations of FAR's proprietary rights, intellectual property rights, and applicable laws. Accordingly, we hereby demand that you immediately cease and desist from each of the following. And I'll let you go ahead and read these on your own. If you like, you can pause the video and read the letter in its entirety. Here is the second page. Okay. So, misappropriation and unauthorized use of proprietary information. Joan's first accusation is that I misappropriated proprietary information, basically saying I stole contact lists or private data. That's simply not true. Over the course of more than 3 years working as a director, advocate, and admin, I was encouraged to keep in touch with advocates, members, and prospects using my personal email. This wasn't hidden. This is how the program operates. Joan also calls this theft of trade secrets. If the ARC wanted the information to be truly secret, she would have kept it locked down, not freely handing it out to advocates and admin telling us we could use our personal email accounts. In fact, it's encouraged because the ARC and Joan doesn't want to pay for each advocate to have a company email. Under trade secret law, the company must take reasonable steps to keep it secret. You have to actually protect information for it to be considered a trade secret. She did not. A common step is having employees, contractors, or volunteers sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. I was never asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, not once. And I don't know of a single advocate that's been asked to do so or has. And let's be clear, when I sent that email, I was still an ARC member. I didn't take anything after I left, and I was communicating with people I already knew and had worked with for years. Calling that theft is very misleading. Unauthorized use of trademark name. The second accusation is that I've used ARC's trademark name and related marks. She claims that the Facebook group that I'm involved in, Life Beyond the ARC, violates trademark law and could cause confusion. Let's start with the basics. As far as I can tell, the ARC is not registered with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Neither is Addiction Reset Community, as it relates to Joan's business. If these terms were federally registered, they'd appear in the USPTO database with a registration number. They don't. That means she would have to rely on common law rights, which are weaker and harder to enforce, especially for something as common as the acronym ARC, or ARC, which is used by hundreds of organizations. Even if the ARC were a registered trademark, trademark law does not give the owner the right to stop people from saying the name when talking about it, especially to describe their own experiences. This is called nominative fair use, and it's been upheld by courts over and over. Nominative fair use is a legal protection in a trademark law that says you can use the actual name of a product, service, or organization when you're talking about it, even if that name is trademarked, as long as you do it truthfully and without pretending they sponsor or endorse you. The ARC or FAR is not sponsoring me or endorsing me. The courts use 3 simple tests. First, is there any other practical way to identify it? Second, Are you using only what's necessary, like just the name? And third, are you avoiding anything that could make people think you're affiliated? A great example is the TV series with Leah Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. Scientology is a registered trademark, but the show used the name freely because it was necessary to identify the group, and no one thought the show was endorsed by Scientology. The same principles apply here. I can say Addiction Reset Community or the ARC because it's clearest, most accurate way to identify the group I was part of, and I'm not claiming any connection to them now. My use of ARC in the Facebook group Life Beyond the ARC is exactly that, naming the group I used to be part of so people know what I'm talking about. I'm not pretending to be the ARC. I'm not selling ARC's programs. I'm not selling anything. And I'm not claiming that the ARC is endorsing me. I guess we could always change the name of the group to Surviving the ARC or Escaping the ARC, since that is what it really feels like, and make it even more clear. That's not trademark infringement. That's free speech, and it's legal. Defamation and false statements. Joan says I made disparaging, defamatory, and false statements about the FAR's business practices, including saying their programs violate licensing and regulatory requirements. She claims that I've made false statements so harmful they're considered libel. Here's the problem. For something to be defamation, it has to be a false statement of fact, not an opinion or a true statement. Everything in my email was based on my own experiences, observations, and publicly available information. The letter doesn't even specify which statements are false or why. Without pointing to exact words and proving they're untrue, it's just a broad accusation meant to intimidate. I am not required to issue a retraction, and sending one when my original statements were true and in good faith would be dishonest and potentially used against me as an admission. My original message was sent internally to other members while I was still part of the ARC. It was a caution to colleagues about ethical concerns, not a public smear campaign. Truth isn't defamation. Opinion isn't defamation. And raising valid concerns about professional practices, especially in a peer-supported setting, is not illegal. It's protected speech. Here, at this point, I'm going to show you the email that I sent to ARC members. So again, you can pause the video here and read this. This is the email that Joan is referring to. This is the second page of it. Pause and you can read that, and then we will move on. Okay. Defamation of personnel. The next accusation is that I defamed individual staff and what she calls internal experts. This is just the same defamation claim from Section 3, but pointed at specific people. The legal rules are the same. It has to be a false statement of fact, not an opinion, not truth, and it has to cause real harm. My comments about credentials were based on publicly available fact. If someone is presented as a professional resource, it's fair and appropriate to look at whether they hold the licenses or qualifications their role suggests. That's not an attack, that's due diligence. In this video, I'm only going to address what I said about Joan's credentials. Sheila's cease and desist will be addressed separately in part 2, linked to this video. In my email, I stated that Joan is not a licensed mental health professional. That is a factual statement based on publicly available information. Joan herself has never claimed to hold a clinical license in counseling, psychology, social work, or psychiatry, and her own bios confirm that. Joan does hold a PhD in addictive nutrition, and that's her area of expertise. But a doctorate in nutrition is not the same as a clinical license in counseling, psychology, social work, or psychiatry. I recall Joan saying that she's been in therapy, I believe, for about 40-ish years. That may give her a lot of personal insight, but it doesn't make her qualified to do therapy on other people. I've been going to the dentist my whole life. That doesn't mean I know how to fill cavities. Just as I wouldn't expect a therapist to prescribe medication outside their scope, I believe Joan should stay in her lane and operate within her actual qualifications. Pointing out the absence of a license is not defamation. It's a verifiable fact. And it matters in the context of my concerns. My concerns, and the reason I raised it, was about unlicensed individuals being trained and encouraged to facilitate trauma-related parts work. That's an ethical and safety discussion, not a personal attack. Under defamation law, truth is an absolute defense. The opinion based on disclosed fact is protected speech. What I said about Joan's credentials was true, relevant to the discussion, and made in good faith to raise legitimate concerns. I'm not sure if I'm going to say this correctly, so you may just have to read it, but I'll give it a shot. Tortious interference with business relationships. Joan's next accusation is that I've committed tortious interference with business relationships. That's a legal term for intentionally causing someone to break a contract or stop doing business with a company. For her to prove this, she'd have to show that I convinced ARC members to leave, that it caused real financial harm, and that I had no justification for my actions. Here's the truth. I haven't asked anyone to leave the ARC or cut ties with Joan. People make their own choices. Adults can decide what program is right for them. Joan likes to preach autonomy until it doesn't fit her narrative. I can't make people leave the ARC. If someone chooses to go, it's because they've decided it's no longer a good fit for them. And let's be honest, in my opinion, the ARC's been struggling for a while now. Membership has dropped off dramatically. For example, the first half of 2024, the ARC had about 183 new members. This year, in 2025, only about 60 to 61 new members the first half of the year. The ARC loses more members than it gains each month. In my opinion, the ARC is failing because of its leadership. That trend speaks for itself, and it's not the result of my actions. Talking about my own experiences and raising ethical concerns is not an interference. It's protected speech. Joan hasn't provided any proof that I caused her to lose members or revenue. This claim is more about trying to stop me from speaking at all than it is about real interference. Demand for written assurance. The final section of Joan's letter demands that I send her a written assurance within 5 days by email and certified mail, promising that I've stopped everything she accuses me of. Here's the thing. A cease and desist letter is not a court order. It's just one party's demand. I'm not legally required to send her anything unless a court tells me to. Sending a written assurance could be used as an admission even if I didn't mean it that way. I will not sign or send anything that implies I've done something wrong when I know I haven't. My refusal to provide that assurance isn't about being uncooperative. It's about protecting my legal rights. Before I close, I want to point something out. My original concerns and the reason I spoke up were about the ways parts work is being conducted inside the ARC. These were safety, scope of practice, and ethical concerns. But instead of addressing these points directly, Joan has tried to turn the conversation into a claim that I'm somehow against peer support. That is simply not true. I believe in the value of peer support when it's done ethically and within proper boundaries. And I'd like to share, again, bring up my email and focus on this page here. I'm going to point out this paragraph here. Why this matters. We all care deeply about the well-being of our members. To truly support them and protect them and to protect ourselves, we must stay within the ethical and legal boundaries of peer support. If you have concerns or are unsure about the limits of your role, I urge you to seek guidance from a professional outside of the ARC, someone with knowledge of ethical professional boundaries. What peer support should be: providing empathy, encouragement, and shared experience, facilitating group discussions and general wellness education, referring members to licensed professionals for trauma, mental health, or complex emotional issues. What peer support should not be: guiding others through trauma processing or deep psychology or deep psychological interventions, making clinical judgments or providing therapy, promising or claiming the ability to heal or transform trauma or mental health conditions. I am sharing this out of care for our community and the individuals we serve. Please reflect on these concerns and let's advocate for safe, ethical, and effective support for everyone in the ARC. However, Joan would have you believe that I am against peer support groups, and that is not the case at all. So if you hear her speak about that, refocus her to what is actually what my email was about. In my experience, this is classic Joan, steering the conversation to something she'd rather talk about, something she can control. I've seen her do this often. In my view, it's a way to shift attention away from uncomfortable truth, away from things she's uncomfortable addressing, and to keep the focus away from what's really going on, or in this case, to move the conversation away from the concerns I brought up. In my opinion, she tends to create a situation that she looks better in. or that she in the community is viewed as the victim, which garners support. My purpose in making this video isn't to tear down peer support or tear down the addiction reset community. It's to stand up for ethical standards and to protect both members and advocates from being put in positions they're not trained or licensed to handle. If you've ever raised a legitimate concern and had the focus twisted into something you never said, you know how frustrating that can be. If nothing else, I hope this breakdown of her cease and desist shows that standing up for what's right is worth doing, even if it means facing pushback. Until next time, take care. Oh, and click here for part 2. I will go over Sheila's cease and desist.